Hello and welcome to the third episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan. I am a cinematographer and the founder of Owlbot Digital Cinema here in Los Angeles, a small production company. And I've been a contributing writer at Pro Video Coalition for about 4 years now. Today we're talking with Tobias Schliessler, ASC, which is kind of hard to say in English. He is the DP of the new film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, starring Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman, which is available on Netflix. We have an amazing conversation. I really loved this one. I learned a lot. Tobias is very generous with his time and his knowledge. We talk about how important it is to always be working and take, whatever job comes your way, more or less. You don't just take anything, but surround yourself with people smarter than you. Always be learning. Always be progressing. Tobias's CV is incredibly long. He shot on top of really sort of powerful dramas, I guess it's not a docudrama, I don't know what you'd call it, historical drama like Ma Rainey. He also shot Battleship. So, huge wealth of information and talent. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Tobias Schliessler, ASC. So, Tobias, thank you so much for joining us on the second episode of Frame and Reference. Where are you joining us today?
I'm in Vancouver right now, in Canada. I'm working on a Netflix movie here, but I'm thrilled and honored to be on your second show. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, the honor is entirely mine. Me and my girlfriend watched the film in question, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, last night. Loved it. We'll get to talking about the lighting and lensing and all that later. But I was just taking a quick look at your CV.
It's long.
It's long. I was a lot of these I love. Pelham 1-2-3, Hancock, Dreamgirls, Friday Night Lights. Just great. The Omen. Oh, the TV version. Still excellent stuff. How did you get started?
I got started. I grew up in Germany, and actually, my father was a mountain climber that did a lot of expeditions all around the world, and to finance it, he did slideshows, and then he did documentaries on film, television documentaries on his expedition. So I grew up with literally cameras in our basement, and my mother was editing his films, so it was kind of like a family production. And so I grew up with it. Then I got into photography when I was younger, and moved in my early 20s to Vancouver, where I'm right now. I've lived here to the mid-90s and then moved to California, but I started really here in the film business. I went to Simon Fraser University here in Vancouver and studied film. I always loved images. I always loved the cinema, but growing up, it was more like a documentary style that I was accustomed to. And I really liked the dramatic end and telling stories. And so I went to film school. I wasn't quite sure at the time whether I was going to get into directing or, editing. I was always drawn to the photography side, but going in, I was open. But, in my first year, I started shooting student films, and everyone kind of meant like, well, you have a good sense for it. So I ended up shooting a lot of student films, and I just loved being behind the camera, right? Even in film school, I just immediately was drawn to it, and the lighting aspect and the camaraderie and the team effort on it, right? It's not just myself. I love working with my crew, and so it just became, I fell in love with it and never done anything else. I was very lucky. When I started here coming out of university, it was very quiet in Canada and Vancouver. There was none of these, right now there's 70 productions shooting here. At the time, there was really 1 or 2 movies, and it was really hard to get in as a camera assistant or anything. So coming out of school, having done quite a lot of student films, and actually one of my, right out of film school, I did a documentary for the National Film Board with one of my fellow students, Charles Wilkinson, who gave me my first job. So I got out, I ended up buying a camera and saying I'm a DP, right? Because I really didn't have much choice. And then I just started slow. I started just working my way up from tiny little documentaries to very small independent movies and industrials. I mean, anything I could get my hand on, whether I got paid or not, for the first 10 years, right? I mean, I remember my first movie, I got paid, I think, $1,800 for like 3 months' work, and included my van and my camera and everything else that came with it, right? We had a budget of like $30,000 or $40,000 to make it, but really, so I just started small. I learned everything from the crew I worked with. I always kind of made sure I hired a gaffer that knew a little more than I did, and my key grip or my assistants or my operators later, right? I learned from them. I didn't learn from, there's two ways of going, I think, in this business. Is like, you work your way up as a camera assistant, you learn from DPs, you work, become an operator maybe, and just move up. But you learn while you're on set. I just did it the route of going small, taking chances, but never chances where I felt like I can't do it, because that's one of the things you have to be careful with when you're not really officially trained and you're learning on the go. But I really learned. I always had like a fantastic crew, and I would ask my gaffer, what did you do on your last job with this DP that I really admired, or and I would learn the tricks, and that's how we go. And then in Vancouver, once it became like in the late 80s, it became, there was a lot of television movies coming in from the States, and I was one of the few DPs in town, right, that had a bit of experience. So I started doing television movies. And then, there came that point where I had to make this choice. Like I felt like I wanted to just, work on bigger scale movies, and it was hard to do this here at the time. And so I ended up moving to Los Angeles and working my way up there again. I started doing commercials there, and then through the commercials I met the directors that I wanted to meet, and it took me a long time. I always think like a career of a DP, of course you can be lucky and you can be on the one independent movie that you make right out of film school and it wins Sundance and you're moving on, right? It happens, but in general, I think it takes 10, 15 years to really learn your craft, and for people to trust you that you can do certain budgets. I always meant like from $50,000 movie to 100 to 500 to 1 million to 10 million to, at the end it was like $250 million movies. But it took me time, right? I was not one of those overnight successes, for sure not. But I've worked really hard, and I always felt like I just kept on shooting, right? I just took every job I could, because I always felt like I could learn from every job, and from every job you can meet someone. You never know who you meet on any movie or any job or any music video. It always usually leads to something else, right? And you have to have patience. You never know, that comes around 2-3 years later, or the things you thought like, oh my God, why am I doing this? It ends up being the one thing that just moves you forward, right?
Yeah, well, and also too, like when you take, I think it's really important what you're saying about just like working and working and working. I think a lot of people can get too caught up in trying to be the auteur as a DP, and I don't think you're not going to pay the bills that way. And I think everyone, you get the big movies, you get even the big for you if you're on the lower end, but everyone's got to pay the bills, and being kind and working on whatever you can, you end up meeting people who are also just paying the bills, but then maybe they get a break and they remember that they liked working with you, and then off you go.
It is like that, right? And I see it sometimes, friends of mine that are starting out, right? I have assistants, or, they're all going, oh, I don't know if I want to do this because it's not that great in the script. And I go like, well, you're at this place at the beginning, like, the chances of you just working on something, if it's not that great, but you have the experience, you learn what, to this day, I learn every time I do something, right? Like I learn every day. This is our business. Nothing is the same. And the more you learn, the better you will be. And I'll always come, something might happen. I go, oh, I did this, like this worked for this, right? And even though maybe it was not a great project, but I learned something. And it's just dealing with the experience of dealing with directors, producers, ADs, getting things done on time. This is all stuff that, yes, if you're lucky and you don't have to work, you might sidestep a lot of this stuff. But in general, it helps as a DP to have that background, right? It doesn't matter. I find like, it doesn't matter how talented you are, but you need that experience, right? You need the experience of how to move a crew around, or how to make a day, or how to plan your day, or, that you can learn on things that are maybe not that great, right? Or that you feel like it might not do something for you, but eventually it will do something for you, right?
Well, and I think to that point, like we were talking about this in the last podcast, like you can go to as many schools as you want. You can read everything. You can read every episode or edition of American Cinematographer. You can hang out on Roger Deakins forums and read everything, but you'll never get the onset. You can't buy onset experience. So it's better to just take the job.
I agree with you. You can't. It's a different thing, and it's funny because I see it. I might have an operator or a gaffer that's been doing it for a long time. They've been on set for a long time, but you throw me in a situation where I'm like, oh, I can't do this. Can you do this, Sean? Or can you do this? And they don't know how to do it. Not that they don't know how to, but it's a different thing, right? Like it's one thing of learning it or seeing it, but you have to physically do it, right? I find you have to be physically there with the camera. You have to understand where the light comes from. You have to understand when you establish the light from one side and you haven't thought about that the next shot is really coming from somewhere where the light doesn't look that great. Now what do? You've established it. All those things it's hard to learn unless you do it.
And timing, when you're under that crunch, things change very drastically. In academic setting, you don't really you have a lot more time to think.
I mean, I compare cinematography to playing chess, right? It's a chess game. Like I come in there in the morning and I literally have to try to think of every setup, what it's going to take me to do all day long. Like I establish a scene, how is it going to be in my last shot when I have to come around and this and that. And that's not something that you can just learn, right? That's experience, right? That how much time you can spend on one shot, how long how far you can push it, and where you take sometimes more time and less time. That's all stuff that you don't learn how to be a good chess player in one day or in 1 year. It takes time, right?
Yeah. So while you were coming up and you were just kind of working through whatever you could get, were there any cinematographers or filmmakers or anyone that you were kind of keeping an eye on as you were going around? Anyone who helped you or anyone you didn't have access to, maybe?
I mean, we didn't have the, it's interesting because we obviously didn't have the same access as we have now with all online education and everything. I used, of course, I read the American Cinematographer when I was, at the beginning. I mean, I still read it, but then it was like back and forth, really studying everything. My time, whether it was Owen Roisman or Gordon Willis or, all these DPs when I went to film school that I admire and still admire, one of the movies, The Conformist from Vittorio de Storaro is still one of my movies that I go back to and go, oh my God, it's so inspiring. And I like to watch it. I don't know how many times before I do another movie because it inspires me. So there is, a lot of cinematographers that, in the past or now that, I'm always inspired by other people. Obviously now it's like you want to create your own world. It's not that I'm saying, I want to copy this or copy that, but I just get inspired by their work, right? Which is sort of the most important thing to me. Yeah.
Well, and you see, I mean, for me, for sure, like I draw a lot of inspiration from non-cinematographers, photographers, especially. Dan Winters, do you know Dan Winters? Yeah, he love his style completely. And when I set up like a portrait shot of someone for filming, I'm always kind of like, man, should I just pop a little ring light and just kind of take that thing? Because I think we have sort of similar. I think you are attracted to other photographers, cinematographers that seem to be going for the same vibe you're going, and you can kind of, it's not stealing if you take from 5 people.
It's never stealing. It's never. I don't ever think of stealing, right? Because it was even like on my, I had a talk with Larry Sher and who did Joker, and I did a movie last year called Palmer that's coming out in a couple of weeks. But I loved his car mounts in Joker, the way he set it up outside, and you can see the world, and you see him, and all is reflected in the windows and everything. I mean, I literally stole this shot for him for one of my favorite shots in this movie that I did, and I admitted to him. But I feel like it's like a compliment, right? Like, I look at it. If someone wants to copy, I don't think it's being inspired by something. It's never the same anyways, right? But of course you should be inspired. I get inspired by painters, by photographers, by, how you're going to later on apply it in your own photography. But I mean, the one thing is I'm like trying to, I always feel like I don't want to be, I have my own aesthetics that I like, but at the same time, I feel like I need to stay open for interpretation of the script, of what the director was, because basically I think as a cinematographer, which I'm quite proud of, is I learned, I think, the techniques first of like, you can show me a picture and I can completely copy it, like where you would never know who did what, right? Wait, I'm not saying exactly, but I have I have the technical skills to do it. And I think as a cinematographer, you want to learn this, right? You want to learn that if you have to create something, because a lot of times you have to create things that are maybe not necessarily your aesthetics, right? That works for the movie. So I think if I would want to give any advice, it's like really learning the craft, learning what all the lighting fixtures do, what quality they do, how you can use them, and how you can,
I think that's actually a big one, because I was when I started this podcast, I went online and I was just like, hey, if you could ask any cinematographer anything, what would you ask? And obviously I'm asking the people, I'm not asking other cinematographers for these questions, but trying to keep it interesting for everyone. A lot of people have very, very technical questions, like what exact lenses, what exact camera, okay, what exact lighting fixtures did you use? And I feel like after a while, and you can start to see light, it doesn't really matter what the fixture is, as long as you know how to modify it, whatever, to get the look that you're trying to get, the result,
But you have to kind of know how the one thing is I find about that is, or what, it's interesting because, I've done it for so long now, right? That obviously I have experience in it, but a lot of times young, my cinematographers that work around me, or operators that are young that work around, they go like, how do you know which light, that you had to use this light right now, right? Like, and I go, obviously because I've used it, I know exactly what it does. I know the quality it does. I know if I bounce it, if, I have the control over the color temperature, I have the control over this. This will work for me, right? It's good to have that, right? I feel like the more you can learn what actually a physical light is doing, it's like having a paintbrush, right? What is the brush? How thick is it? Is it drawing a line on a painting, right? It's the same kind of thing, right? That's one of the things that just experience will get you, right? But I find that some of my young DP friends, they get intimidated by, I don't know what lights I should order, right? Like at the lighting house for this job, right? Because it is like, what do and I was the same thing at the beginning. Now it's like, I know I'm in small rooms. I know I'm going to use Astera tubes because I won't be able to, hide lights necessarily, or have big fixtures in there, or I don't have enough power, I don't have enough manpower, so I'm going to use a big LED, like a 360 sky panel, for example, through a window. That kind of stuff, it's good to know, it's good to learn, right?
Yeah, and I mean these days too, like when I went to film school, this is 2006 onward, we didn't have LEDs. We were still using those Lowells and all that, and man, like it. I don't want to sound like an old fogey, but it's like, it feels easy now. Like I've got 4 LEDs. This light back here is a bunch of light bulbs in like a little plastic, but they're LEDs, but they're just in a little plastic chandelier. Like you can get decent looking light.
Well, you lit yourself really nicely. I'm stuck here in a corporate apartment in Vancouver. If I was in my house, I'd have a nicely lit around me too.
Yeah, trust me. When I started this, I was like, especially yesterday, I interviewed someone or 2 days ago, and I was like, man, I got to start warning people that this is what mine looks like, because this is a C500. This is a full frame camera pegged at 60. So
nice focus, everything. I would normally do it, but I'm stuck in my corporate apartment here, so I can't do anything.
No, don't worry. How do you? This is actually another question a lot of people have. If you go into a room like you're in, how would you light your 2 camera piece, like right here? If
right
you just
now?
had to think, yeah.
I'd have a big soft source right here, cut it off the wall, maybe right here because I have a little painting there that I found that I just put against it so it's not a white wall. I might have a little Astera tube down there just to glow it up a little bit, right? Obviously, I would use a camera that's have a little out of focus, a shallower depth of field, right? All those things. But normally, the bigger the source, the higher, right above the camera, slightly off. You're good angle. You look good, right? A little bit underneath it. When you're my age, and you need a little help, but
sure. The those Astera tubes, man. Like I've seen every single person ever is using those tubes now. They're so versatile.
Lifesavers, right? And yeah, they're incredible, right? I mean, I use them all the time. Whether it's like, when they first came out, like I had to do a car shoot on the street and we wanted to use available light and the people just driving on their own. You just roof rack, like, 8 Astera tubes just right out of frame on a little iPad, create a little, dimming and color and whatever else we wanted. And we just drove through town, right? And it was amazing. It looked amazing. And I can make a softbox in the ceiling if I'm stuck without getting power to it, right? And I hang 8 into the ceiling, put a little 8x8 light grid underneath it with tape, and I got a soft source over top of it. I mean, they're so incredible, right?
Yeah. I've also found that you can, I've done this before, is you can get those little like cell phone battery packs, like the USB. I guess maybe the Asteras don't work like this, but certain LED tubes you can just, or like what I've got set up here, a little panel, you can plug in those little cell phone chargers, tape it to the wall or something, and it'll go for 8 hours.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. The whole technology now with LED lighting to me is so exciting, right? Like I wasn't good with switching from film to digital. I was so scared when it happened because I was so used to film. I was so used to looking through that finder. I used to always, because I started in independent world as an operator, I always kind of even once I had operators and I just had to look at the lighting, I turned the camera on because just the flicker of that shutter gave me the idea of the contrast and how whether my exposure was good. I was so used to it. So I would do that, turn on the camera for a second, look at my lighting, turn it off again, because I was so accustomed to it. So the idea of switching over to digital and being at a monitor and that all scared me, and I'm not a very technical person. I got used to it, and I've been doing digital now for the last 10 years, but and I love it now. But it took me some time. LEDs, I was like right into it because I always loved changing light during a shot, right? I've always loved having light changes, whether someone comes in and they turn on a light, I want to change the room, right? And it was always so hard because, like, let's say I have a little ambient in a room that's cool because there's just like ambient light coming through the window, but now I'm turning on the room lights and it's practical, and suddenly I want this overhead, the ambience to be warm, right? It was difficult in the old days with regular lights. Right now, with the changing of color temperatures in the middle of the shot, with like the intensity changing, I'm constantly like my most important person now is my dimmer operator. That I have literally right next to me, my DIT tent. He's either in it or right next to me, because once the lights are up, he's my guy, right? He's the guy that's my lamp operator now, that changes the color, that changes the intensity, that does all that. And I'm getting so used to it. I mean, I love it, right? I mean, doing a shot, I would change intensity, I would change color temperatures, and
Well, now there's even a lot of wireless DMX stuff out there. Like you could still be on the iPad and just doing cues.
Yeah. They're all wireless. But for example, the person I'm working right now, they still like that big board for some reason, right? A lot of I've done movies that are, the guys that just use the iPad. Right now, I'm working with someone who likes his board still, but he's right next to me. But yeah, I've done movies where my dimmer just walks right next to me all the time with the iPad and done, right? So it speeds up. I mean, it can be so much faster now, right? Instead of changing a gel, instead of having someone to go up there and throw a double into the light, right? That we used to do. Now it's like, boom, done, right? Like,
what was your switching from film to digital? I think is something that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot in terms of how it affected the way people worked, but also the aesthetics and the way that you thought about lighting? Because, nowadays you can, like I said, I'm lighting with barely nothing here. Yeah. Film, especially if you're used to shooting film photos, for those of you listening, you need to punch light in there.
Of course.
What was that transition like for you? How did that change the way you think about shooting?
Well, it was a comfort level for me. Film was a comfort level, right? Because I'd done it for 25 years before I started shooting digital. I was so used to it. I knew exactly with my light meter what 3-foot candles meant, or what 6-foot candles meant, or I knew my rate. I knew my film was like after 3 stops under, it's gonna look like this, right? Or the shadow, the blacks will fall apart and it's gonna get noisy or underexposed. I was so comfortable with it. So my light meter, being on set and looking through the camera, was just something that's how I. It'd be like painting a brush and suddenly you're getting on a computer and painting on a computer, right? So it was that transition. So I was just like, I was really scared of it. At the same time, DP friends of mine always said, like, Tobias, like, you'll be shocked how much more control you have, or how far you can push it further, because you won't go to bed at night worrying whether you were like underexposed. The shooting sometimes under those, at night, or in scenes where it was really supposed to be dark and you're pushing that film and you're just at that line. If you were like a half a stop under, it became grainy and muddy, and just waking up in the morning, looking at having talking to your print to the color, to the timer at the lab, and he's giving you the printing lights, and you go like, oh God, like I was under, it made you sick. Couldn't sleep, right? Now I can sleep when I go to bed at night. I also found it so I did my last real movie that I shot on film was this movie Battleship, right, which was big event movie. We shot it on anamorphic, and I was on that movie for a year because it got pushed, and then we did more prep, and then this time. So I was literally gone, and I do, in between movies, I do a lot of commercials. And in that year, for some reason, I think it was in 2010, everything switched in the commercial world, everything switched to digital. I don't know.
That was 2012?
Was it 2011 or 2000? Somewhere around that, Alexa came out, and I come back into the commercial world, and everyone said, well, we're going to shoot this on Alexa. And I go, oh my God, I don't know how to do this, right? I was so scared, right? And then it's always like you get into it and you realize it's not that scary. And then I really embraced it, because I suddenly felt like, wow, it's like I can actually push it a little further, because, a lot of times, when there's a lot of things riding on you, do you really want to push it that far, right? Like, you have big actors, can you play them in a silhouette? Can you not see them? Or maybe you don't want to see their eyes, or whatever you want to do. Now it's pretty simple. Like, I can put my director into my tent and say, like, this is what I want to do. Are you okay with this? And they say yes or no, right? We didn't have that before, right? We didn't have that luxury. I couldn't show him. It always looked too bright. Everything looked too bright on set when you were shooting film, right? Because the levels had to be higher, your ASA. Even now, like, a 500 ASA on my meter, when I look at the digital, it's too bright, right? It doesn't, you can, you know what it is at the end, but it doesn't transfer that same way. And
no, and cameras don't even match.
No, and
like 400 on this camera looks like 800 on the Alexa.
I know. And I shot. I didn't shoot. I was. I shot on. I used the Sony Venice lately quite a lot, and
love that camera.
Great camera, and you can switch that to 2500 ASA if you need to. I've done it a few times, but I've never seen it used. My daughter is an upcoming director, Aisha. She shot a short film at my house in the summertime during COVID time with her DP friend and my ex. He used to be my DIT, Jeff Tomshaw. He has a Sony Venice, and he shot for her at 2500 ASA at my house. I could bear. They shot at night, always available light except a little light for the actors, but it was so dark, right? It was so dark I could barely see the marks on the floors for the actors or something. It was crazy, like, and it came out beautifully, right? And I mean, that you couldn't do on film, right? It's impossible, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's exciting. It's definitely exciting now, the technology, and it makes it to more creative filmmaking, and you look at the quality of work that's out there right now. It's shocking, right? Like, it's shocking when I see the work that's done in the streaming, whether it's Netflix, the limited series or the series or anything on television now. The television series and the movie, they're getting, I don't want to admit to it, but they're getting as good or better than any movie that's out there right now, right?
Yeah, that sort of TV versus film rivalry is gone at this point. Like, no,
gone. All we can do is try to catch up with the TV because, I mean, sometimes they have a little bit more time, not time, but they can establish a look a little longer, right? Because in film, you get into a movie and, you're in there, you don't get another episode to push it a little further, another episode to push it a little further. We don't have that luxury necessarily in television. But yeah, the works become great. But I think it's also a sign of, because we can be, it used to be all about time in television, but now we can be faster, right? Because we have available light. We have these cameras that can capture under low light. I still think you still have to light the same way in a way. There's no difference. And sometimes I think I have to light even softer for digital. I have to use bigger sources, softer, bring them in. But it's just become faster because I don't necessarily have to light the background, right? I can shoot in the city and worry about the actors, not worry about what's going to be, 5 blocks down. I used to, do movies where I had 15 generators for like 4 blocks of the street and 20 Ks on each rooftop down, and it took a week to pre-light 3 city blocks. Now I just shoot it and worry about the actors in the foreground, which is different. But you still have to, especially faces, I find, and I'm sure see that too. You just have to do pretty lighting, right? You can't just, that doesn't go away. And where you put the light and how you light it, it's all the same, right? It really is.
I find myself, this camera, I use this primarily now because I own it. I find it's a little flat, so I end up having to use a lot more neg. Yeah. I'm deleting light more than I'm adding.
Yeah. That's I find that though too. Same thing for me. It's like a lot of times it's like take this away, put blacks all alongside and solids all alongside, and create negative. But it's just a different style of lighting. It still comes to the same aesthetic, right? Like you're creating contrast, you're creating separation, color. Right. The beautiful thing is now with the LEDs, I love that you can just create like color, like I was just shooting in a hallway and there was a staircase and let's try like a real greenish cyan in the background, soft, like and we put it was beautiful, right? It was one button, right? Let me see that green. I'll just make it a little more green. Let's make it a little more cyan. It used to be like, do we have cyan shells in the truck? No, probably not. Or you had to think about it before and you had to kind of figure out how much you need. Now it's like one button and it's there. So I find a lot of movies now, which I love, is the color separation is getting like, people are really playing with that.
And you're doing a lot of on-set grading, or like live grading?
I think, I'm very fortunate. I work with really good DITs that can color and they can do it, right? We work so fast, it's hard sometimes to do. What I find is I create Scholat with my DIT and the colorist that's going to do my movie. I work a lot with Stefan Sonnenfeld at Company 3. He's been doing for the last 20 years or longer. I've been working with him in commercials and then in movies. In my first DI movies, he's been with me, he's done everything. I go to him with my DIT. I shoot tests of what I think scenarios of the movies, lighting setups that I think we're going to do. Take it into the lab with him, take it into the color suite, and then create that LUT. And then I want it's interesting. My DIT is really, like I talk to him like, what do you think, right? Like, what do you think about this? But I hire people that I really trust and that I love and that I have aesthetics similar to me. And my second eye, right? They go like, oh, Tobias, maybe this is a little too bright, or you take this down a bit. We work together, which I love. That's what I love about making movies and shooting. It's a collaboration. But I don't go into trying to I try to keep it as simple as possible, my dailies, if I can, right? I still do a lot in camera, right? I still use grads, even though you can do this later. But on movies, we can't do color timing like that for all the visual effects, for all the editing. It has to be, I don't know, we can't manipulate that. I can't add grads to my dailies, or so I do it in camera, and we just try to keep the color as consistent as possible and face tones. He works on that for me all the time, because sometimes you don't have time enough to gel something or to change the color or everything. Sometimes the lenses or the way you look, it changes the color temperature a little bit of the color. So he adjusts all that for me, and we put it into color edit list for the colorist. And but I don't usually I have a dailies colorist that I send it to on those movies, because there's just too much stuff that we do, too much material and I want my DIT not to be so involved in having to do all the coloring. I really need him next to me, right? Like and talking about it, and I usually, because I shoot a lot with two cameras, and I do a lot of slight exposure changes, especially if cameras move around. I do a lot of movies with Pete Burke, for example, that I don't know if you know him. He does a lot of, his style is like 3 cameras, very documentary style, even on big movies. I have to kind of light it 360. He gets in there and he just has the operators moving around, and he might even say, like, over the megaphone, he uses a megaphone, he goes like, "B camera, go get me that close up right there," right? Or get me that insert right now. He does that, right? He likes to run the camera, he likes to run the scenes, and he covers everything. I mean, I've shot like 4 or 5 page scenes in like a couple hours with him, because he just goes, right? And that's how he likes to do it. He doesn't tell the actors where to go. So in that case, I feel like I'm constantly talking to my dimmer up, because he's going to bring up lights and down. I go, "Oh God, this camera's over here, now bring this down," right? And I adjust it on my remote iris control, and my DIT is right next to me. He runs one camera, I run one camera, and so I need him to be right there. I don't need him to color really.
Totally. So to get to the film that you're here to talk about, Ma Rainey, like I said, I saw it last night. Great film, loved it. I came up in theater, so seeing a more theatrical film was kind of fun for me. In the movie, for those who haven't seen it, it's available on Netflix. Just go watch it. Plus, a little behind the scenes thing is also available on Netflix. But it mostly takes place in 2 locations, and I was hoping you could run us through. And then, if we have time, the tent scene looks really nice too. But the basement and the studio. How did you, I assume that was all on stage. Oh, and outside, that was all digital, yes? Yeah, I figured.
Yes.
It looked like too perfect. Like it was beautiful. And I was like, there's no way.
That was all controlled. I gotta be honest with you, that was all controlled. That was one of the challenges, it's a movie that I was really, a little scared of when I first read it, right? You read that script and you suddenly realize it's 50 pages, half the movie is in a basement rehearsal room, and in the script it's described as a windowless room, right? So, and originally the director was adamant about not having a window, but we ended up creating this small window. I can get to this if we have time, but but reading the script first, it's like, wow, what do I do? The room is described, and it was only, the basement is like literally, the room was 22 by 18 foot room. It had those, and we didn't build it bigger. The room that you see is the size it was, because normally what you do is like you realize this, like, and it was one of the first things I said is, can we not build this bigger? I'll make it look smaller. I can make something look smaller, right? But George Wolfe, the director, wanted the actors to feel the walls are creeping in on them and they have no place to escape from. Originally, the room was described as a windowless room. It's just a practical. He wanted it to feel like it's like the underbelly of a slave ship and they can't go anywhere, right? It ended up that we were on a scout, just looking at texture for this room, where we saw the storage room that our production designer led us into, and it had one of those little windows, and we were going like, wow, and it looked beautiful. The light came through there, and it looked gorgeous, right? And Mark Ricker, the production designer, I said to George, this is kind of like something that we were thinking about. And he goes like, well, you know what? I can see it, because he really wanted that heat. And I don't know if you felt that in the movie. There's a lot of heat.
Yes.
And so and I go like, I can bring that sun in there so you can feel the heat. And because it's high up and it's small and there's like, it's like a grate in front of it, they won't reach it, they won't be able to reach. So that's how he justified it at the end. It was like they can't reach it. So it is something to the outside, but you can't reach it and you can't get there. But the heat is coming in that you can't escape. That was sort of the theme. It was definitely, he wanted Chicago to feel as hot as it can possibly be. And when you mentioned the outside and that it was so controlled, or that it looked so, controlled, we did control it because I wanted to feel that heat. And we were shooting on a street that was the only street that worked as we shot it in Pittsburgh for Chicago for 1927. Of course, that recording studio was on the north side, so I had the sun behind me the whole day. And sometimes it would go behind buildings. That's the first thing I do. I check with my sun seeker and go, oh, okay, I'm in trouble, right?
Invaluable app. Everyone should have that app.
That's the first thing you have to have, right? And if you're shooting outside, that's your lifesaver too, because you can schedule things when it's going, but you also know when it's going to go behind. And the scenes, we shot all the scenes in front of that studio over 3 days, but the one scene, the accident scene, is really over like a day and a half. The sun comes up there, it goes behind the building, comes out, it goes out on the other side. How do you control this? How do you make it the same in the summertime? You never know what it is. And unfortunately, there was like electrical wires everywhere, where my key grip said to me, normally I would just hang like a 40 by 60 silk over the top of the thing and light it with a big BB light or something. And that was not possible, but my grips there, Bill Flaherty, they were amazing. They came in with like smaller fly squatters and sometimes hung like 20 by 20s off the building between things and patched it together. So I did control it, and then I used, instead of a BB light, I got these LRXs that are 18K paths that you can remotely control, and we put 6 of those together on 2 condos next to each other and spotted them all into this area. So that's how you got the heat. And then we used I used like just an 18K through Chimera for like wrapping the light around a little bit more. But yeah, it was all controlled because we wanted to feel that kind of heat and that kind of golden light that, George Wolfe had a painting that he referenced that Mark Ricker had found that was Chicago 1906 that had really that kind of sweltering heat and those tones, those warmer tones. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really like everything, not everything is backlit, obviously that'd be silly, but the backlighting, that sharp heat, the warmth, very rich film. Like I found myself just constantly going like, damn, this is like, I can grab it. It's the contrast is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I also used this Tiffin glimmer glass that...
I think I have that on this lens.
You do? I don't know many people that know that. Hardly anyone has ever heard of glimmer glass.
Yeah,
I love that filter.
They make it a screw-on too.
Oh, really? No,
you don't even need the big one.
I hadn't. Quite honestly, I used the Hollywood Black Magic a lot. I haven't used the glimmer glass in like 10, 15 years. I used it sometimes on commercials, and when I did the test, I tested all the lenses for like different lenses because originally I was going to use maybe some vintage large format lenses or some Hawk anamorphics, and I had Kessler Camera send me all these lenses out to do my first test, and I had them send a whole bunch of filters because I wasn't quite sure, skin tone, color, but I wasn't really thinking about the what it would do in terms of heat or shine or anything like this. But then in the last moment, I remembered I used that glimmer glass that was kind of blooming the highlights more than other filters. And then I remember this bronze glimmer glass. So I used the bronze glimmer glass, which has like some warmth in the highlights, right? It just creates a little bit of warmth in the highlights. And that combination between that blooming the highlights and adding some warmth to it really helped to sell that heat, right? And then, the makeup artists were amazing, right? Just to get that shine on everyone and keeping that shine. And but
also production design was insane.
Beautiful.
So good.
Yeah, beautiful. Mark Ricker is amazing, and he's one of those, really good production designers that work with the DP. It's a collaboration, right? I can make his sets look good, but he can help me all the time, right? We help each other. If it's a good collaboration, we help each other, and he's great that way. And he fought for me for a lot of things, like the window. He fought, even though it came across, it came naturally later and it worked. But he's definitely a person in terms of practicals. A lot of times, you need the set decorator is a really important person for a DP in terms of practicals and how they, what you can get, where we put them and how they work, right? So that's another collaboration.
And what lenses were you shooting on?
Ended up using the size Supremes, which I would have not. I mean, I had done a movie with them before, but it was a contemporary movie, an action Mark Wahlberg for Netflix, and it worked. They were great for that, and I've seen it. My daughter did a little demo for them, directed a demo for that with a good friend of mine as a DP, John Joffen, who's an amazing DP. They went out and shot this, and when I first saw their short film, the demo film, I went like, wow, these lenses look amazing, right? They look beautiful, and they shot on the Sony Venice. But for this film, I didn't think it was the right choice, right? I wanted to use older vintage lenses possibly, so I got the Canon K35 sent out, I got the Leica M set out, I got the Hawk anamorphics, because I thought maybe I want to use anamorphic. Kessler sent me all those lenses out, and then I did the test, and I wanted to involve George Wolf in picking the lenses a little bit. And, at the end I thought, for safety, I'll get a set of the size Supremes, right, in case he really doesn't like the idea of a vintage lens or something. I just wanted to have one set there that, so I shot them all. I always in testing, especially if I want to show a director something, I do the extreme focus pulls, right? Because I knew in a movie we're going to be a lot of focus pulls. We wanted to be very close, so close focus was important, and then the rack focuses was important, and the distortion on the wider lens was important. So I shot all of them. I was drawn to the Canon K35s because I love the flare of those and I like the quality. But when George saw them all, and he saw the focus shifts and he saw a little bit of distortion, he goes like, I feel like I want to be the least distracting with the lenses as possible, right? So ended up using the size Supremes. Then that was the reason why, with the Canon K35, I may never use those, the glimmer glass, because they already have a softness to them. But the glimmer glass in combination with those Supremes, combination with the Sony Venice, who is really beautiful. I love the way it renders the colors. I like the what you get in the highlights, right? The detail in the highlights. It's a good camera. And then I love the NDs, the switching of the NDs, right? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Do you find, I mean, now they're so accessible, like I said, I'm shooting on one. Do you find that you're enjoying the full frame capture more so than Super 35?
Yes, definitely. Because I love what I got from anamorphic, right? I love the shallow depth of field, and that's what you get in large format, right? You get the slightly shallow depth of field. I personally love being close on wide lenses, right? I mean, I love Emmanuel Lubetsky does it on his movies, which I love the look of them. He's very bold, right? He can be in there on a 16 mil on someone. I sometimes get scared with that, but I do like being closer in and wider. And what it gives me in large format lenses, something like a Super 35 lens would be like an 18 mil. Now I can use a 29, get the same effect, but I don't get that really distortion on the face, which I prefer. And then, quite honestly, I find these days a lot of times the directors, if they want to be a little closer to an actor, they push in, right? They push in post. And the amazing thing is that if you shoot 6K large format, like you can push in 25%, you never know, right? You would never notice it. Where if you shot, regular, like on the older Alexas or something, regular Super 35 format, it was harder if you had to push in. So that's sort of, not that I want to give it, ideally, push in because that's the frame we shoot and this is what we like, but I understand that's the way our world is, right? People are going to reframe. A lot of times I also like now that you have all the format, like for visual effects, or if you do have to be coming up or lower a little bit, or they need a little bit of room or need to shift something, they can, right? So it's good. It helps everyone.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the lighting in the basement because I was watching that special features thing, which I hope Netflix does more of those, because growing up, like watching special features on DVDs and now Blu-rays, like you learn so much. I saw in the basement you had sort of like a balloon light on the floor.
Yes.
Was that just there all the time? Like what other lighting situations were going on?
No, because basically the idea was for me is like I have strong lights coming through that window, right? That's my main source. The sun is up there, right? And for that I used like it outside that window, even a small window. I used a 20K Fresnel. That's the only regular lights that I used was outside that window. I used a 20K that came really strong and hit the floor. And my idea was like, I'm get this hot sunlight coming in, and now everything that is inside should kind of bounce off from the ground as a motivation, right? And then I had another couple of 10Ks that would kind of highlight the sides a little bit. I had some park hands where I could, all coming through this one window. I think I had about 50,000 watt shining through that window at the end, right? It was quite hot. Could have melted the set. But inside then, my thing was like, like I did have a softbox up on top. I had like a softbox that I just, however little I need. Sometimes I run them at like a couple %. I never run them much, but I just want something there in case I need just a little bit of ambient fill. And then we had practicals that came on when they walk in, and I used those as a motivation for just like highlighting a little bit in the backgrounds where I needed it. But the idea was to let the walls fall off if we can, right? But I also don't want to fall them off that you can't see something, but I always like to see into the shadows too. But yeah, so then I strategically, you saw that one ball, it was a Chimera ball, but sometimes I used regular lanterns, Chinese lanterns sometimes. I sometimes used, if I had to be low and more directional with it, I would put like a light mat 2 or light mat 3 or 4 or the 2L on the ground. I had them pretty well. I strategically, whenever we did a blocking and I see where the cameras would go around, I'd throw them on the ground and wherever I can, turned off. But there was times like there's this one shot that I loved. It's one of my favorite shots in the movie where Chadwick ends up talking about his mother being raped. It's super emotional, and he walks into this close up, right? And I had a light on the ground, right? We didn't know how far he was going to come. We didn't know how long he was going to stay there. It was one of those magical moments where the camera was at the right place. It started tracking in. My operator started, but I also wanted the light come up. So I had my dimmer up, just bring it up, just as we were pushing in, the light got a little brighter and brighter and brighter as he's talking his emotional story. So yeah, I kind of just tried to, because a lot of times we shot with 2-3 cameras, and sometimes
in that little room.
Yeah, I shot with like 3 cameras. They were hiding behind things, right? One camera would be there and it would fall away. The other camera would come in and cover something and then fall away again. We did even a 360 in there. Like we did a lot. When you look at it closely, yeah. And because some of the scenes, especially the emotional scenes that are like 8-page long, George did not want to interrupt the actors, so I had to have multiple cameras at the right place to capture this. And when this main monologue that Chadwick Boseman has, at the end, the last 3 minutes is two cuts, right? Or you can tell 2 angles. It's like the one that he walked into close up, and then there's a front angle that when he turns around and walks towards the guys and talks to them, this camera picks it up, and then the other camera picks it up again when he goes back to his locker. It was 2 cameras shooting simultaneously, and all on sliders and all on dimmers, and it was a real ballet between camera and actors and being out of their way. But so it was like, to me, it was like a combination of light mats, digital, the LED light mats, and the boss. But I was like, I was like lighting for motivation, right? Like, and that window gave me that motivation, and it does bounce off the floor, and that's why the light should come from below, right? I mean, I did the top light. I usually just use for a little ambient if I need it.
Yeah. How do you? This is actually just kind of a personal question at this point for me. When you're contemplating the color contrast between like an ambient fill and your key light, are you trying to make the ambient match? Or are you going for a slightly cooler fill, or what's the deal there?
Cooler, yes. I mean, obviously it depends if you have. It just feels like, especially if I have warm light coming through a window, especially if I have I find color separation always helps, right? And it's also just like, what would it be, right? But in a day where the sun comes in, the shadows are cooler than the sun, right? So I would play the ambience cooler for sure.
That's a painting technique, isn't it, that they teach you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always,
It all comes back to that. It's what's natural, and you don't want the sun to be cooler than your ambience, right? Like, it just doesn't, it seems like it's natural, and that's how your eyes get. And also, I find shadows look better when they're a little cooler, right? It's hard to make a shadow look like the shadow side or the darker side. I don't know, when it's warm, it gets kind of muddier, right? When it's cool, the darker side gets a little more, stays crisper. I don't know what it is.
Well, everything is, I've said this for a while, everything is contrast and context.
Yes.
So, everything, music, lighting,
yes,
cinematography, filming, all of it. I noticed in the studio scene, mm-hmm. The characters go and black out all the lights. Was that story based, or was that you guys?
Story based. And of course, I was crying first, right? Like, I'm going in this room, we established it, we have these windows. I got 20Ks hanging everywhere, blasting in there. It feels like a hot Chicago day. And in the script it says it, George Wolfe says it, as soon as they start recording, the sound has to go away. We have to close the shutters, we have to close the curtains. It's not a real recording studio, but they would never record with not the windows covered, because you get the street noise, right? So it was like, oh God, who would know? Of course you would know, right? Like, and then I was trying to go and I said, like, can we have a translucent curtain, because I wanted to get a little light through the windows. And then it was like, no, we have to have shutters. And oh God. And then I thought, like, let's just have like some slits of the shutter so we can push some light through there. So it had to be a solid curtain. So, but as soon as we started shooting it made sense, right? It would have been like, why are the windows lit, right? Then you're in a recording studio. So it all makes sense. It's just one of those things where, at the beginning of in my career, or whatever you want to call it, when I started shooting it was always like, oh, I want to make this look beautiful, and I want to make this look this or that, right? But, later you realize, like, it is about the story, right? You're not shooting your demo reel. You're not shooting your, it's so easy to think you want to shoot your demo reel at the beginning. Everything has to look great, but it doesn't, right? It has to be appropriate, and it has to work for the story. And in this case, once we started shooting, I realized, it would have been really stupid to have like these lit curtains, right? But at the beginning, you just think visually first, right? Because I go like, wow, there's going to be another 40 pages now where I'm in this room without any kind of highlights outside those windows. It's like, what do I have? Just walls. But then, in that room, because we shot a lot of not 360s, but I had cameras everywhere for the performance piece, and we shot with 3 cameras always. And, the whole idea, you don't want to interrupt the performance either, so I wanted to be quick shooting around everywhere. So I did light it basically with a big softbox above, right? But that became my real source now because I could justify. They had some practicals inside there, hanging practicals. So that was my motivation for having a top light. And I made the top light big. It was on chain motors, so it was always right outside my frame line, right? And if I can bring it, like when I shot Viola Davis, Rainey, for example, at the microphone there, and I was shooting in front of her, I would just bring that whole softbox like right in front of her. I would drop it down right over top of her head. And that's a great thing with like LEDs, because now I can just bring that level down. I can just bring this side of the softbox down a little bit and keep the same color temperature. It used to be if you had like tungsten lights, you dim it down, suddenly it'd be way too warm, suddenly you'd have to adding gels. So that's all a nightmare. So that's the stuff in top light, to me, I like top light. It was one of those things that's, it's not that easy to use sometimes, right? Because it's not necessarily the most flattering light, but it can be, right? If you're able to bring it super low, just so the light still creeps into the eyes. I did have like some LEDs behind the camera, right? That like sometimes 4x the light mat forces, I mean, just for wrapping it a little bit more, but the source was really coming from on top.
I'm a huge fan of top light. Like when I realized that with digital especially, you can get away with a lot of soft toppy stuff and it won't be too contrasty in the face. Oh,
I know, it's nice, right? I know it was that's another thing. That's a hard thing that was hard to do on film, right? Because I know it was like, how do you get it in there? Do you have enough for the eyes? The ratios, but now you see it, and if you have to just add a little bit of highlight, you add it. But it's a beautiful light from on top.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, I don't want to hold you forever. I've said this before, but I could talk to DPs all day about literally everything. But I assume you have life to get to.
Yeah.
So just to wrap it up, I like asking, what everyday thing do you find most important to help you get through this career path, and also any personal projects you're working on?
Patience. Patience. I think, it's like, as a DP, I find the pressure of the time pressure, it's just every day I feel if things don't go quite fast enough, or if things go, I feel like I have to kind of meditate and breathe myself down and go like, I have to have patience, because everyone that works for you works as fast as they can, right? And that's sort of one of the things I've learned more and more is just be patient and be calm and also be good to everyone. You have to be. It's all about how people, they want to be around you because you're a good person. You want to be around you because you want to have fun, right? I try to keep my set as fun as it can be. Obviously concentrating on what we have to do, but I like to keep it light. I like to keep everyone involved. I like to praise people, right? And I want them to be part of my process, and I want them to give me all the ideas they have, and I take them. Or to me it's a big collaboration. That's why I love going to work, because we're fortunate as DPs, we can hire our friends if we want to, or we hire crew that we want to hire. So I always feel like I'm the most blessed person in the world, because I work with my friends, right? And I treat it like this, and we respect each other like this. So, but yeah, patience and but patience is all, that's one of those things. Being patient about your next job, or how you progress your career, right? It's all about being patient and not giving up and just staying on it, and But then there's, obviously tools, like you said, your Sunseeker. That's one of the things you can't do without. Your light meter that you still have, right? Like there's things that make you. Awesome. I like that. See, that's awesome, because a lot of people don't have them anymore. Like I've walked out of my house sometimes where I go, oh, because now it's like you don't need them all the time, right? You don't. Like once I establish my lighting setup, I'd like to go in there and make sure, just double check and walk around and know where I'm at. But I don't really need it, but I wanted to have it. But I've gotten into my car before, especially when on the movies, I have it on my DIT table or in the camera truck, but on commercials, sometimes I get in my car, I go like, oh, I don't have my meters, and then I go, oh, I don't really need them. But then I stop, I reverse, and I go like, I can't leave my house without it, right? Even though I can get away with it, but I won't, right? It's one of those things, and I have it in my hand. I have the same one for 30 years, and the leather and this, it just becomes like a comfort thing that you have with you, even though you don't need it. But
no, absolutely. Before I got this, what is this, the L358, I had that little tiny like $50 box one that I was using when I was shooting 16. Oh, yeah. And it's like a sanity check.
Yeah, it's a sanity check. It is also like one day, if everything breaks down and you don't have your monitor, your wave monitor, or whatever you don't have, right? I will take a reading and expose it properly and shoot.
Yeah. So any personal project, anything you're doing that's not necessarily film related, but anything you'd like to tell the folks about?
I live and breathe for film, what I do, right? I'm a workaholic for sure. I've been having a lot of fun with my daughter, who's not that young anymore, but she's been an inspiring director. And, in the COVID lockdown, we worked together on a treatment for a movie, and I helped her produce her short film, and we've become like we work together on projects that are more passionate and smaller projects, but I love doing that. I mean, I'm very lucky. She wanted to be originally an actress, and then started. She wanted to do a commercial spot for herself and didn't have a director, so she did it herself and suddenly fell in love with it. And I never saw her growing up that she had this passion for photography and for filmmaking, really, except acting at the time. But she gave up the acting and got behind the camera, and I did a short film for her for Fujino lenses, because she did a short film for the size Supremes with my friend John Joffin, and then she got approached from Fuji to do something for the Premista lens, and for the
those are nice.
And so we did a short film together. It was the first time we worked together. I try not to, I tell her, you have to, she needs to work with other DPs. She can't, but we really see eye to eye, and we have got the same taste, and she helps me a lot with like presentations and research and all this stuff. So it's been fun, and that sort of was my, I feel like I get to do a little bit more creatively with her by helping. Like she calls me and she does music videos and she asks me what I think, but vice versa, right? Like I send her my scripts and do that. So that's been fun. But I really it's terrible, because I always say if I had the choice to go on a vacation or on a film set, I'd pick the film set, right? Any day.
I'm genuinely the same way. I mean, my whole. I'm surrounded by it, but intentionally. I never felt like, oh no.
What do you have back there against the wall? Are there snowboards?
Yeah, so I've been snowboarding my whole life. I used to run the college ski club, and so I got 2 snowboards, and I was a magician for a very long time. So these are both uncut card sheets back there.
Oh, great. Excellent. Well, I actually grew up skiing, and I did all my first stuff was like actually skiing for ski films and assisting a ski cameraman for a while too. So I know.
It's the only thing that sucks about snowboarding is you can't film while it's very difficult to snowboard and film. Skiing, at least you're aimed forward.
I know. I can't. I tried the snowboarding, but I'm too much of a skier. I tried to use that technique, and I crashed so hard that after a couple of times I went back to my skis, and I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I lucked out. I grew up. I think I got put on a snowboard when I was 4.
Oh yeah.
So it's second nature now. Well, Tobias, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great conversation. And hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon.
I'd love to come back one day soon. That'd be great. Thank you.
So that is it for my conversation with Tobias. I really hope you found that as enjoyable and as educational as I did. If they all go like that, we got a hit on our hands, folks. That's kind of what I'd like this podcast to be, is just what that was. And like I said, as we go forward, I'll probably be a better interviewer. I've already learned a few things I'd like to do differently, or in fact not change, going forward, just on the heels of these past 3 episodes. So like I said, you can watch, listen, or read these interviews at provideocoalition.com, youtube.com/owlbot, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts in audio form. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks so much for listening or watching or reading, and you will hear from us next week. Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Mattbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the interview you just heard by visiting provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.